Hi, boys and girls. If you've joined to listen to the read aloud of the British strengths and weaknesses, which then afterwards you're going to go in and fill in what some of the strengths were of the British Army and some of the weaknesses in the American Revolution. So here we go. Britain, in contrast to the American colonies, entered the war with many advantages. They had a lot of positive things going. But looks can be deceiving, and the British also encountered many problems. With a professional army of 50,000 troops, British forces greatly outnumbered the Continental Army. They had a lot more soldiers. In addition, George III hired 30,000 mercenaries, which are soldiers that they hire and pay to fight with them. These hired soldiers were known as Hessians because they came from a part of Germany called Hesse-Cassel. The British were also able to recruit many loyalists, African Americans, and Native Americans into their forces. So people who wanted to stay with the British because they thought they would get rewarded. So they were called loyalists, the colonists who sided with the British. African Americans, if they may have been promised freedom if they fought on the British side, freedom from slavery, and Native Americans may have received more land or stopped people from spreading on their land if they fought with the British. British and Hessian troops were well trained in European military tactics. They excelled in large battles fought by a large group of troops on open ground. They also had more experience than Americans at firing weapons. The British forces were also well supplied. They never really lacked food, uniforms, weapons, or ammunition. So it says compared to the pitifully equipped Continental Army, meaning the American Army did not have those things, where the British did. They had plenty of food, uniforms, weapons, and ammunition to fire the weapons. Even so, the war presented Britain with huge problems. One was the distance between Britain and America. Sending troops and supplies across the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, was slow and expensive. News of the battles arrived in England long after they had occurred, making it very difficult for their planning process. A second problem was that King George and his ministers were never able to convince the British people that defeating the rebels was vital to Britain's future. There were no Joseph Martins, who was mentioned in the other article. There were no patriotic people in England volunteering to fight the Americans. So people in America saw what was going on and knew that it would be good for them to help fight and help their team. Whereas in Britain, people were like, meh, I don't want to fight with you. So it was hard to get people to help. The longer the war dragged on, the less happy British taxpayers were about paying its heavy costs. A third problem was poor leadership. Lord George Germain, the man chosen to run the war, had no idea how to defeat the rebels. How could he? He had never been in America, nor did it occur to him to actually go to America to see what his army was up against. If he had, he might have realized this was not a war that could be won by conquering a city or two. He didn't understand how big this war was. He had never been to America. He didn't know what was going on. To end the revolution, his forces would have to crush the Patriots' will to fight, state by state. Instead, he kept changing plans and generals, hoping that some combination of the two was going to bring him an easy victory, which it was not. So now what you're going to do, go back, use the text, go back and jot down some of the strengths and weaknesses of the British Army. Let me know if you have questions.